Ladies and gentlemen, right now I'd like to welcome to the show a friend, a favorite performer here in the New England area and nationally. He works all over the country. He's a folk singer, he's a comic, he's a writer, he's got a book out, he's got several CDs. Several DVDs. He's really, really funny. Every year you can see him on the funniest folk singer concert. He's been doing that for about at least 10, maybe 15 years. He works all over the country with both spoken word, poetry, primarily folk music and humor. He's got a soul as big as his hometown of Lynn, Massachusetts, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome the one, the only, the social activist, the political activist, the songwriter, the author, the poet, the man, the myth, and the legend, the one and only Mr. Don White.
Hey! That guy sounds really interesting.
Welcome to the show, Don. Thank you so much for joining us
I'm glad
today.
to be here, Jimmy. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm good, man. It's all good.
You are working like crazy, Don.
I know.
You're an author, a writer. You're doing folk music. You're doing political activism in Lynn.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
You know, no rest for the weary, Jim.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Now, you grew up in Lynn. You're from Lynn originally. When I first met Don, he was so. Not only is he a great writer and performer and musician, but the guy really reaches out and helps a lot of other people as well. And when I first met him, I did my first spoken word piece.
I remember it.
It was right down the street at
Catch a Rising Star.
It was Catch a Rising Star, and I also did one at the Middle East.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It was and what's her name was on the bill? The writer for the Globe.
Patricia Smith.
Patricia Smith.
Yeah.
The great poet and writer Patricia Smith was on the bill. But anyway, and it was the beer poem. And that was this poem about trying to stop drinking and how influential beer was in my life. And it was, and anyway, Don came up to me after, goes, that poem is great, man. You got to keep doing this spoken word stuff. And I said, really? I go, it was kind of just a stream of consciousness crazy thing. He goes, no, you got to keep doing it. And he was really helpful in working with me, helping me to develop a one-man show and saying you can use these spoken word pieces in your show so it's not just comedy, not just every 15 seconds there's a laugh or every 30 seconds or whatever, every minute there's a laugh, but there can be some peaks and valleys in terms of commentary and comedy. So that was a really cool thing, Don, that you did, and I know you do that with a lot of artists.
Right, and I like it myself. The idea of segmenting comedians from poets and all that, that's like a modern idea. Nobody ever told Charlie Chaplin that he couldn't be funny in one scene and sad in another scene. And somewhere, like in the 70s, some guy with a cigar said, if we got rid of this poet, we could just have a comedy club here. I think the guy's girlfriend would like it too, and you know what I mean? There's more and more money in it, but people are wired to go back and forth if they understand that's what it is, and I think there's power in it. I think if you take people on a journey for your 45 minutes or an hour, and it's not all just ramped up comedy, that lots of times they respond to it well. I mean, it has to be good, but you can't have them looking at their watches and their phones when you're not being funny. But as long as the quality of it is good, I think it's more powerful. And in my experience, it creates loyalty. If that's what they like, they have to kind of come to you for it. There's not. It's not everywhere for them.
Right.
But having said that, I know nobody should take financial advice from a folk singer. So I apologize for giving you this bad advice.
I love it. Well, what's the old joke? How do you make $1 million? And how do you make $1 million in folk music?
You start with 2.
You start with $2 million. That's the key right there, ladies and gentlemen. When you told me that, I cracked up. But Don, growing up in Lynn, Massachusetts, are there a lot of folk singers who've come out of Lynn?
No, I only know one other person who's made a living at music that I went to school with, and there's some other people who sort of dabble in it but have a day job and all that. So no, there's not a lot of folk singers anywhere, are there? I mean, Cambridge.
But they're transplants.
Right? They do massage therapy on the side.
Right. Right. Growing up, was music a big influence in your family? Did you study it in school?
No, not in the family, but I was always drawn to it. You know, my mind works sort of, like once I get interested in something, I can't stop. I have to kind of just, like set everything else aside. So I got really interested in Bob Dylan, and then I learned about Woody Guthrie, and then, I remember distinctly, I think it was 1973 or 2, I realized that people that Woody Guthrie had toured with and lived with, Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, were still touring, and they played here in Cambridge. And I came in by myself because my friends weren't interested in it, and I just came and I went all weekend. I went to every show. They used to do 4 shows a weekend.
Yeah.
And I went, I was interested in it.
And what year are we talking now?
73 maybe.
Okay.
72.
And where were they playing?
At Passim.
Right.
And they would play all weekend, like Friday night, Saturday night. And I just came in. I got on the train and I came in and I did it all by myself because I was just interested in it. And I couldn't believe that I was in a room with people that had been, doing union work and all that stuff with Woody Guthrie. Mm-hmm. So I've been kind of diseased with it as a kid, and just on my own. My parents weren't interested in it or anything.
So did you teach yourself guitar?
Yeah.
Basically?
Yeah.
Wow. And what about singing? Did you teach yourself to sing?
Not yet.
I disagree, listener. He's got a beautiful voice.
Yes.
His voice rivals that of Tingle.
That's right. What a duet. Just like everything in my life, I never had a plan. When I got interested in it, I couldn't not do it. I didn't feel good if I didn't do it. I felt like I was missing a vitamin, or something like that. And, like my dad said, eventually, if you do anything long enough, you'll get competent at it. And then, I just didn't know how not to do it. Right.
So you started going to open mics. How long between 1973, first seeing Sonny Terry and those people, before you started to actually play? To
go out and play?
Yeah.
87, so over 10 years, 15 years. Yeah.
So it took a while before you felt confident enough to go out there and start doing.
Well, what happened was I quit drinking and I had a windfall of time. I couldn't sleep at night, and I didn't realize how much time there was in a day. I just couldn't fill it up, so I just started going out and playing music just to fill the time.
Instead of practicing
where I would have been drinking,
Wow. Yeah, I know. I can see how that can happen. I can see how
It's amazing how much time it takes to be a drunk, Jimmy.
Oh, I know. It is a huge waste of time.
Well, if you think about not just the time you spend drinking, but the time, just think of it as non-productive time.
Yeah.
So all the time that you're drinking, you're not producing anything, not writing any songs or comedy. And then the next day, even though you're not drinking, you're not doing anything because you feel bad.
Yeah.
So it's really double the time of your drinking that nothing's getting produced, and then you make that a year or 5 years or whatever. It's a whole mess of stuff where the time where you would have been doing something is not happening.
Right.
Not to lecture the crowd.
Right. No. My audience loves this. They're all trying to stop drinking, aren't you, folks?
Right.
Be honest. You could be a folk singer. You could play Passims. If you just put down that beer, you could do something with your life.
This is streaming directly to halfway houses around the country. Good.
No, but that's interesting. So it fills up your time and your creativity. I imagine stopping drinking, your creativity really starts to surface.
Right. I just think of it as a windfall. I just couldn't believe 2 things: how much money was still in my wallet, and how much time I had. It was this gigantic challenge to figure out what to do with the time.
Right. And plus, your car had so many fewer dents.
Right. That's right.
And you knew where your car was.
I did.
So you had a dent-free car. You knew where it was. You had a bankroll in your pocket.
I didn't have to hire a cab to try to help me find it the next morning. Yeah, it's great. Glad we got into this.
So then you start playing out. Now, this area of the country, first of all, you're pretty, what type of background do you come from in Lynn, would you say?
Ethnic background?
Yeah.
My dad was Irish and my mother is Greek, so it's a forbidden cross-pollination. We're forbidden from reproducing.
Irish and Greek.
for excellent reasons. Yeah, we call it Gyrish.
Gyrish. And what kind of neighborhood was it?
Just a working class neighborhood. Everybody worked at the GE at that time. Of course, now you need
General Electric?
Yeah, General Electric in Lynn, the River Works, it's called.
Right.
And now they shipped all that stuff out. I mean, you need, I think, 30 years to stay there. But
Really?
in those days, everybody worked there.
So it was a big company town.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. In the 60s and 70s, it was. Yep.
Right. And Lynn, and so you come out of Lynn, you start working out. Now, how was it going from like pretty blue collar working class neighbor? Because I was reading your book and I was reading excerpts, and you used to hop trains. Where did you hop the trains to?
To Saugus and to
So you hop trains in Lynn, go out to Saugus,
Yeah.
go to the beach.
walk back.
You couldn't get a train back.
No, but I kind of liked that. That's another thing. I was just a weird kid. I enjoyed the being alone, walking, letting my imagination go, and it's, nobody. That's why writers never. That's why they need help crossing the street, because they're distracted. They're in some imaginary world.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So anyway, so how was it though, making the transition, going from your neighborhood in Lynn to places like Passemes and clubs here in Cambridge and Boston?
Well, it was great. It was great for me. I had. By the time I started doing that, I left Lynn in 1974 with my girlfriend at the time, but my wife now, been married a long time, and we hitchhiked for 3 years. So I had been exposed to a lot of things that weren't like Lynn, ashrams and little bastions of creative thought. Mm-hmm. So finding where I could just get to Cambridge and be around artists and all that was good for me, because I was already had already been introduced to that, and I was interested in it through my travels.
Right. Now, when you said you hitchhiked around for 3 years, solid?
No, it was 3 out of 5. So it was like 1 year, then 6 months, and then another year. And
but when you say you hitchhiked, did you have a destination in mind?
No. We got. I mean, I feel like I'm talking about like a guy who used to make buggy whips. Like it's such a. Do you know what I mean?
Well, at the time, hitchhiking was not that uncommon.
But we like sort of refined it, and like instead of just going someplace, we just got interested in freedom. Like to me, because we would just go someplace and look on a map and say, this looks interesting, let's see what happens there. And then whoever we met, we'd decide whether we liked them or not, and then we'd get pulled into their world and something would happen, then we'd get sick of them or they'd get sick of us, and we'd go back and see what other thing happened. So we didn't really have a destination. The destination was adventure. It was what will happen if we go here.
Right.
And so the word freedom is a huge word to me. When I had to like go back to holding a job after that, like I feel like a dog on a rope. Like I just couldn't.
Yeah.
It's a big, deep word. When you have 3 years of your life where you have nothing to get out of bed for, nothing to go forward to, nothing to go back to, just whatever the day provides, it's kind of spoils you. Makes it hard for you to be a good employee. That time clock just signifies, everything opposite of what you've learned to appreciate.
Right. They never know. Is Don going to come back from work, or is he going to hop a train to Canada?
I started in 10 years old hopping freight trains. Right. That's right.
Don, but your girlfriend, not only were you obviously a free spirit, it's kind of unusual to have a girlfriend that's on the same page. How did you meet Terry? I met his wife now, a wonderful woman, just a super, super woman, and a great soulmate for you all these years.
Yeah, it's been good. How did I meet her? She was a local kid. She grew up in the projects near where I lived, and I knew her. In
Lynn?
Yep, I knew her from school and all that. And one thing that's good about Lynn is that it's an easy place to leave.
Do you remember Bob Seibel?
Yes, I do.
Bob Seibel, a great comedian who unfortunately passed away this year, but he was so funny. I'm from Lynn!
Yeah.
Lynn, the city of sin. He goes, Lynn sucks. He would go, a McDonald's closed in Lynn. It's the only place in America a McDonald's closed.
I know. It's got a lot of problems, but, as time goes on.
And I say that out in Bob Seibel's voice, talking about Lynn at the difficult time when the jobs left and GE left and, it closed up and there was a lot of unemployment.
A lot of bad decisions by the government. Things are a little better now. There are signs of life there, but everybody I love is there.
Yeah.
And my accountant called me one time and she said, I have to tell you this. I've been doing this 20 years and I've never seen this. Not only is everybody in your family in the same town, she said, Don, they're in the same zip code. She goes, I mean, that never happens. And part of it is luck and stupidity and whatever. Like, we didn't get the memo that you were supposed to leave. Nobody told us.
Yeah.
But as a result, I can walk to my children's house and my grandchildren's house, and my son had the same paper route that my dad had. You know, there weren't crack houses on it then, but you know, but I'm steeped in the place, and now I'm like an elder statesman, and I have a lot of influence there. You know, here's an interesting thing, Jimmy. I'm 50. I'll be going to be 59 years old this weekend, right? So.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. What I'm realizing is that at this age, like somewhere in your late 50s, before 62, 63, or in there, if you're still in the town that you grew up in, you're at the peak of your influence, because everybody that you know is the boss of what they're doing. They started out in the warehouse, but now they're the director, and they haven't retired yet. So if you decide you want to do something, get a grant, write it, we need a space to do this performance thing, you have this tremendous influence because everybody that you know is running whatever they're doing. Right. And then it ends like that. I remember seeing it with my dad. He went from a guy who, you know, do you need a plumber? I know a plumber. Do you need, right? But then all of a sudden, nothing. He was
Those
talking.
Those guys were all gone.
They were all retire or they die. And then, so if you're interested in doing something, it's at this time in my life, I'm trying to do a lot of things in Lynn because, you know, my friends are on the city council and they haven't retired yet and all that stuff like that. So I'm aware of that. I've always been aware of windows that were closing, that you need to act before you know?
Yeah. So when you hitchhiked around the country for 3 years, you and your girlfriend, Terry, you eventually got married. I read someplace that you lived in a teepee for a year.
I don't think so. It might have been somebody else. We lived in
It was a different Don White.
Yeah, we lived in a...
That was a Don White from Revere. It's Don White from Lynn.
It's a common name.
Yeah. I thought you lived in a teepee up in Maine or something?
No, we lived in a house with no running water in Maine.
It's like a teepee.
Yeah, it's a modern teepee, a more firm one. Yeah, less smoky. We moved to Maine. We thought it was going to be cool and hip and like Northern California, and it wasn't that much. But we moved there and lived in a house with no running water, and then we finally got running water, and you know, to kind of inch our way back into the world. Like, so we went from living in a tent off your back to a house with no running water.
A tent, maybe that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, we carried a tent with us and lived for several years actually, just setting up the tent wherever we were.
And were you playing music at the time?
The last year that I was there, I picked up a guitar at a flea market and would play a little bit around the campfire, but no.
Did you do any street performing or anything?
No.
Like for spare change? How did you make a living?
We saved money when we weren't traveling, and we left it with my mother, and then she would ship it out to us a little at a time. So we stretched. I think the first year took we spent $1,000 or something. So we'd be, as we were running out of money, we would buy food and stock up, and then we'd hold up someplace. You know, everything was an instant. Hold up. We'd hold up.
Not rob.
We would stay somewhere, and then she would mail us something, or Western Union, or you know, back in the day before everything was instant, you had to hang around and wait for the general delivery at the post office.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Well, Don, it's really an interesting background. That's why I wanted you to talk about it, to inform our listeners a little bit where Don White is from, because you made this transition from a very free spirit. You're still a free spirit. You made a transition into among the best folk singers and the most well-known touring folk singers and most successful in the country. And but your point of view always comes from, or does it always come back to your roots and your philosophy and your concern about, you know, your hometown, people in general? Because you seem to, right now you're very active in the city of Lynn, trying to do more things, and that not everybody takes that road.
Right, and I think as you get older and you get what you want, do you know what I mean? Like, it's harder to think about your community before you're making any money, or before you're sure that people are going to come out to see you. So I think the early part of it, you kind of have to just be focused on making sure that it is something that you can make a living at it, that you build a fan base and all that. And then once you think, okay, unless I do something colossally stupid, like decide to be a drunk again or whatever, I probably will be able to do this the rest of my life. There's enough people coming out, and I have some albums and all that. At that point, then it's easier to think about what to do rather than just build the career. And so right away I just thought...
Start thinking about other people.
Right, and then you have some influence too. So you can help other people with their careers, you can teach, and then now I've done it a long time, and I've been in Lynn a long time, so I actually can bring a lot to the table if I decide I want to do something. So I started a spoken word open mic in Lynn 7 years ago. You should have seen the looks I got from people when I told them I was going to start a poetry reading in Lynn. That was good. That was really good.
All the GE crowd came down.
They did.
You guys have been on GE for 30 years making missiles. Let's go to the poetry reading.
Yeah, right. There once was a man from Nantucket. But it turned out to be the greatest thing. It's been 7 years now. It's called Speak Up. Other people run it now, but I got it going, and it's just fantastic because it's designed. Do you remember Jack Powers?
I do.
Well, I designed it after that. He ran right over here.
Yep,
at
TT
the Bears. He ran for many years something called Stone Soup Poets, and I liked the way he did it. He just would... Well, you know how crazy Cambridge was and is, and there would be an insane group of poets, and he just kind of stood there sort of calm and put his arm around the thing and made sure nobody fell off the edge, and just let them be whatever kind of free spirit madness they wanted to be within this sort of contained circle. And a
lot of great poets came out of there.
He had,
Brother Blue was there all the time.
He had Ferlinghetti there and all those guys. He was friends with
Ferlinghetti.
Right. I mean, and it still runs. It's in. He's been dead a while, Jack, but it's the Stone Soup Poets still gather, and they're at the Out of the Blue Gallery, or this gallery right down the street here on Monday nights still. But anyway, I modeled it after that, and then as a result, we got a lot of people who didn't know they had a voice to come and express themselves. Immigrant people who didn't know anybody wanted to hear what they had to say, people with mental health issues, young people, like in Lynn, in all towns like Lynn, you can find people who are 5 or 6 generation descended from drug addicts and stuff like that, and they've been homeless, and we call them feral children. They kind of raise themselves. And it's been a place for them to gather, to come in and to realize that there's a place where they can belong, and then also realize that they have a voice and that we're interested in hearing it. And I'm really proud of that. I think it's a template that could be used anywhere, because the social services, the churches and the schools, they can't really get those kids. They don't want to go to a church and talk. They don't want to go in a school, or but they'll come to a place. If I'm running it, because I tell them they can say whatever they want, and they can say it however they want. We don't care what kind of language they use or anything. And then they find each other. It's like this little band of bullied and kids that aren't sure who they are and they don't really belong, and they sort of find each other, and then they take care of the next one that comes in. And so it's sort of a self-sustaining, nurturing thing for people who don't have a voice to find one. And I've always thought, Jimmy, that one of the most radical things you can do in this world is to give a voice to people who don't have one. So I'm really interested in that, and the success of that has made it so that it's made me more interested in it. Like I'm capable now of teaching other people in communities how to do it, what not to do, how it works, and how to reach out to kids, the unreachable ones.
Right, and having something like that, and it's also commerce. It's commercial.
Well, it helps the business.
So it helps the business, but it also helps the neighborhood.
Of course,
because you bring 50 or 100 people into a place once a week. That's great for everybody in the neighborhood, either the pizza shop to the bar rooms to the parking or whatever.
No, it's great, and and it can do things that's the sort of surface value of it, but the deeper value is in the community. We, have people who have mental health issues, or people for whom English is a second language. When they come in and they realize that we respect everybody and we want to hear what they have to say, that's a new thing for them. And then they unleash stories that would never have gotten told, and we learn about what it's like to grow up in Haiti or Albania or whatever. And it does so much for the community that you can't really define it. It's just it's huge. It opens the community up to itself.
Right. You mentioned Jack Powers, and I remember him fondly. He was instrumental with TT and the Bears, and was a real creative force in the city, and helped a lot of people. And he also coined a phrase called, as Cambridge started to change, as Cambridge and as rent started to really go up in a huge way, and people moved out, he coined the phrase economic cleansing. It was during Bosnia and the war, when they were talking about ethnic cleansing. He coined the phrase economic cleansing, where people were getting, rents are just going up, buildings are transferring ownership, and people are getting moved out. And there's no, it builds up other communities that bordered Cambridge. Many people went to Somerville, and some went to Medford. It's still expanding. Has that happened in Lynn? Is there, is there that pressure, that economic pressure on rents? Are they going up, or is there still good deals, or people can still live pretty comfortably on a middle-class income?
Yes, it hasn't happened, and Lynn always lags behind. They're going to develop the waterfront, and their goal is to do that, is to bring development to, like, Lynn has this gigantic waterfront, and the great visionaries of our ancestor visionaries, they decided that would be a good place to put a junkyard and a dump and
on the water,
on the factories. And so it's like the last sort of undeveloped hunk of land on the North Shore, on the shoreline, and they're trying to get everything cleaned up and build condos down there. So we see that it's coming, and I'm not totally against it.
Right. Because you want it to a certain extent, but you go and create the balance.
What I would say to anybody who sees it coming is try to own what you're living in, because if you rent it, then you're at the mercy of the prices. If you own it, then it's good. Then the value of it goes up, and you can decide to stay with an increased value. But it's easy to say that. That doesn't mean you're capable of doing it.
Right.
That you have the money. But so no, it hasn't happened yet. You can still put a lot of first-time buyers in Lynn and all that. But the plan, and there is some movement toward it, is to bring development to the downtown and all that, and we want that. We want it to develop and to have there be more art scene and all that. It would be nice if we didn't chase everybody out while that was happening, but
right. Is there public transportation that goes right to Lynn?
Yeah, the commuter rail goes to Central Square.
Okay. Now, where was the WFNX? Remember WFNX? It was located. Was that in Central Square?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, they're gone now. That's the School of Rock now, and that's all. They got designated as a cultural center down there by the state. So there's some money there, and there's some art. There's Lynn Arts is there, and there's really pretty significant signs of life in Lynn through a lot of hard work by a lot of people. So we're hopeful. I've been there a long time, so I'm a little cynical, I think, about it. But there's some new cafes and some new things, and people working really hard and trying to do it. And to me, it seems slow. It seems like it's taken a long time.
What are you working on, Don? You were telling me about this piece of land that's been there's contentious ownership issues.
All right, so Lynn, Massachusetts has the largest wood reservation owned by a city, I believe, in the United States. It's 2,200 acres. It's called Lynn Woods, and it has 3 reservoirs in it. And it's just this amazing. If you look at a map of Lynn, it looks like about a third of it is woods, and it was put together in the 1800s by these visionaries who were trying to protect the water and the land. They had the guy who designed Central Park, what's his name? Olmsted. Okay. They had him come in, and they weren't sure what to do with it, and he said, just leave it a forest, an urban forest. And it turned out beautifully. And we've been fighting because you can imagine what it's worth to developers. Like part of it,
2,200 acres?
yes, and
In
part
Lynn? Wow.
yes, and part of it is on Route 1, which is worth so much money, and everybody's always trying to develop that. Every time we get a new mayor, they get a visit from somebody who's saying, how about this land out here? And so we've been fighting as Lynn residents since the 70s to protect this land. In 1971, they were going to put Interstate 95 right through it. They already took houses in eminent domain, and that went all the way to Governor Sargent, and he vetoed it. All that stretch on the Marsh Road that has the big lumps of sand on it, that was going to be 95. So it's been endangered. It's always endangered, People are always chipping away at it, and every time the city needs money, they say, "Well, let's sell off a hunk of land." So last year we started an effort to put a conservation restriction on it, and we're in the middle of that now, and it looks promising. If it happens, it'll happen next year. The city has to all vote on it, and some of the voting has been done. The mayor has promised to sign it, and then it goes to the state, and they have to sign it. But if it happens, that'll be a 45-year fight that we will have won.
Wow. And when you say we, are you actively involved in the negotiations and going to meetings and advocating?
Well, I do all of that.
Speaking?
I try to stay in the back and use my influence quietly, but there's a group called the Friends of Lynn Woods, and they're sort of in the front of it, and I am involved with that as much as I can be. We had the way it came about was we had a mayoral race, and one of the people running for it was running on the platform to sell off a hunk of the land, and he kept saying it's not really Lynn Woods, but we knew it was, and that it's watershed land. I mean, with water the way it is now, it's just obscene in our opinion, to sell off this land that where the headwaters of all of Lynn Reservoir goes underneath, but it's right on Route 1 there, and it's worth so much money. So we became active politically to get the other person elected, and as part of getting them elected, the Mayor Kennedy reelected, she promised to work with us to get a conservation restriction and just settle this once and for all, so that the next person coming in can't just do the same thing, because eventually they'll do it. There's so much money to be made. So we're in the middle of that now. So I've been involved in the politics of it, and in the sort of, figuring out who's against it and what they need and what it needs to change their vote and all that stuff like that, as well as many people have. But it's been a long fight for me, and I created the biggest cleanup of Lynn Woods in the history of it when I was 16 years old. Really? Yeah, we had 3 dump trucks hauling trash out of there. We had tow trucks up there pulling out burned out cars, and we had Boy Scout troops, and I did all that when I was 16 years old.
By any chance, is Braycott Reservation in that section of woods?
Well, if you were a deer, you could get from one to the other. You'd have to go across Route 1. Okay. But if you looked at it above, they're close to each other. Okay.
I remember going there as a scout. Yeah. On the Boy Scouts.
Right. They're not connected, but they're close to each other.
Okay. Yeah. Don, it reminds me of what Don Henley did in the Eagles at Walden Woods. I mean, it's very similar. Sure. Musicians getting together behind a common goal to preserve, in the case of Don Henley and Walden Woods, Walden Pond, when developers came there, and you're doing it on the local level, and it's pretty cool.
What I think is important, it's important to say to people who are young getting into politics and this stuff, is that you have to be in it for a long fight. There's a great documentary about all these punk rockers who were involved in politics for the first time for Al Gore, and then they were so devastated when he lost to George Bush. And there's a scene in this documentary where there's an old activist from the 60s talking to this punk rocker who's throwing his hands up. It's rigged. We're not going to, and he says to him, it's so compelling. He says, you fight, you lose, you fight, you lose, you fight, you lose, you fight, you win one, you fight, you lose, you fight, you lose. That's why they call it a struggle. It took, I think, 70 years from the beginning of suffrage to the vote. You know, you can't. You have to get used to losing. You have to get, but you win by wearing them out, by being in place when the time is right and all that stuff. And so I see a lot of people, young people involved in politics now, and I can see how traumatic it is for them when they don't get what they want. And I think it's important for them to know that we need them in the bigger fight, and we need them to be thinking of the long run, not to pack up and go home when you get beat, because you mostly get beat. You mostly lose.
Initially.
Well, it's a long fight.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a perfect example, really, of the Sanders campaign right now. He's got a ton of young people involved, but Bernie Sanders has been doing this, his activism, since the Vietnam War. And, you know, and he was on the outside, you know, usually on the outside. Sure. And he was activist, and he was marching with Martin Luther King when it wasn't popular.
Of course.
And the Vietnam War being against it was not popular. And the whole, you know, everything he's fought for, and here he is, 50 years later, running for president, and it's a huge political force in this country. And it doesn't even matter if he wins. It's what he's done and what he's put on the table.
Well, he's made Democrats act like Democrats, or at least talk like it again. So we owe him a great deal of gratitude from my political perspective. What I would like is that if every person who's out there at his rallies has a life like he had, doesn't just pack up and go to spring break and run around on the beach if they lose or whatever, that they get involved and go, and 50 years from now run for president, or, you know, make a life of it. That's my fear. Is I remember the 72 election with George McGovern, and it was all young people at those things, and they were so sure they were, and he lost 49 states. Yeah. You know, so you have to be in it for the long haul, and you have to show up too. You can't just be waving a banner. You have to deliver votes too.
And there's lots of different ways to be involved. I mean, some people, and what's really neat, I think, is to see people. Not everybody is a hardcore political activist. Not everybody's going to, you know, hold a sign on election day for a ballot question or whatever. But everybody can do something. Everybody, and even if it's not political, coach Little League, you know, help kids in the neighborhood, right?
I agree with that.
You know, coach a neighborhood basketball team or whatever, you know, something that's helping other people, and you're getting involved, and it's community spirit.
That's right. Where do you live? What can you walk to and impact? That's how it starts. It's all grassroots, you know, and then it can grow from there, or you can be happy with that. I personally like to be, I don't like people to know that I like to do it, be involved in it, and make things happen, and use my influence, and talk to people, and let other people take the credit for it. Because some people seem to really enjoy being in the photograph and all that stuff. I just want it to get done. I just want Lynn Woods to be protected. I have some other projects. I like my poetry thing. I'm interested now in the opioid thing that Gloucester is doing, where they sort of decriminalize.
Tell me about that.
Well, do you know the story, the Gloucester guy?
I think it started with the police chief, right, in Gloucester, with the opiate overdoses in Gloucester. Is that right?
Yeah, and he decided that we weren't going to be able to incarcerate our way out of this. So on his own, he just said, we're not arresting people for this no more. If they come in, we'll treat them like human beings and get them in a program. And he got a bunch of money, and he figured out where the programs were, and he just started doing it. And it, you know, right now it's been a year or something like that, and he's got stats now to say it's saving the town this much money. There's this many people off of the you know, in programs.
He's getting them in treatment.
Yeah, all over the country. And then he's putting pressure on the drug companies to help out, and he's putting pressure on the social services to help him with rooms and beds and all that stuff. And he got organized, and it's tremendous. You know, the time is right for this. I hate to say this. I hate to say this, but what Richard Pryor said is something becomes an epidemic when it starts happening to white people, and it's happening. Like, we had 7 overdoses in one night in Lynn, and 4 of them died, and one of them was a kid that my kids grew up with, and was a little kid living in the same apartment as me. So it's not like it's buried in a lower income neighborhood. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, you have a friend whose kid knows somebody who died from it or is dying from it or whatever. So the political time is right. Unfortunately, it shouldn't take it to get all the way this big, but the time is right. And so I've been talking to my counselor and different people and seeing if we can't do exactly what he is doing because of the politics of it, maybe we can do something.
But I mean, usually when the police are involved, people will step up regardless of what party they're in, right? If the chief of police thinks it's a good idea, usually the political people will come to the table and said, okay, he or she, they're nonpartisan, because oftentimes it's been law enforcement opposing things like that. The attitude of lock them up and throw away the key, and obviously it hasn't worked. The more enlightened and progressive people in law enforcement and the more enlightened and progressive conservatives around the country are seeing the same thing. You get all these southern evangelicals.
That's right.
They're huge into prison reform.
Right.
They're huge into treatment. A couple of different reasons. A, they think it's the right thing to do, but B, the cost of incarceration is off the charts, and these states don't have the money.
Like Chris Christie was talking about, the time is right. There's politics, like right now, as I understand it, the chief of police in Lynn doesn't believe in it. Right. Their argument is we don't want Lynn to be a place where drug addicts are coming to right, and that's a powerful argument,
right?
Because it's a soundbite argument. And it's visceral, and it's so. In order for it to happen, maybe we have to change him. We have to do something different that he can live with, or maybe the tide will just keep growing and he'll change his mind. But no matter what, that's not a reason not to pursue it. The time is right. If the friends of the people in the city council. Her children are dying from it, so they can't pretend it's not happening, and they can't pretend. They want to do something.
Yeah.
How it works out politically, everybody has to feel like they're okay with it, and that's the process, and it's okay. You don't get mad at somebody for having a legitimate argument like that. Like, why should this be a place where everybody comes? That's a concern. That's a legitimate concern. But you figure out, okay, what can we do?
Yeah.
Let's do something that works here for us.
No, it's a great thing. It's a great thing to be able to be involved. Not only play music, entertain hundreds, thousands of people a year, all over the country, but also to be engaged in your neighborhood to such a great extent and actually making a difference in your neighborhood.